allow me to bring you to the first of the two-part series of Transforming My Experience. How do my experiences transform into becoming God's best version of myself? How will I be able to do that? And today, allow me to bring you to that journey wherein I think each one of us is and will go through this experience. And what is that? Research shows that the best moments of our lives do not come from leisure or pleasure. A lot of us desire to always take our off days, to take travel time, because we say that that is where we learn the most. But research debunks that idea. The best moments of our lives do not happen during leisure and not even during pleasure. They come, according to John Ortberg, when we are totally immersed in significant tasks. In tasks that we do that have an essence. In tasks that we do that matters to us. And where do we spend most of our time in, except during work? Our young people might say, oh, the message is not for me. Why? Because I'm not working yet. But allow me to state this, that all of us work. If we look at the definition of work, which is an activity in which one exerts strength, so that means there is effort involved in it. That means there is a bit of brute force that we have to put in. Or faculties, and what are these faculties? Our bodies, it can be our hands, our feet, our legs, our mind, to do or perform something. And add to that, in those faculties are included equipment or materials that help us to perform that task. And what are these equipment that are presently helping us do our jobs? Our computers, our gadgets. They say that we spend our time on work for almost 85% of our living lives. So can you imagine if you live, say, to 50 or 80, and you spend 85% of your time working? Where else would God be able to meet you at best but during your experience at work? Right? If we are spending most of our time working, then God can choose and will choose to bless you at your working hours, at your working time now. Not in the future, but mind you, the Lord can very well bless you in your future, and He has those blessings in store already. But the Lord can and will transform your experience at best during work. And because of that, if there is one thing that I'd like you to take home today and bring home in your koinonia on Friday for discussion, it is this. It is doing our best, not being the best among others, that matters to God. Today's workforce, the Generation X or the millennials, had this definition of work. They say that work is boring at best and a necessary evil at the least. Do you agree with that statement? Why? Because there's always something else that we want to do. We always want to do something that is outside of work. Right? Now you're beginning to agree. And they say that it is a necessary evil. Why? Because we need to work to be able to live and fend for ourselves. We need to work to be able to shop. We need to work to be able to go to Orchard Road and do all of our shopping there. That's why it is a necessary evil that we have to do. But to others, they say that work is a curse. The reason why they feel it is a curse is because they say that it is part of the fall of man. That when God banished Adam and Eve out of the kingdom, out of the garden, that was when work started. But that again, my dear friends, is not true. Because at the beginning of time, when God gave Adam and Eve the Garden of Eden, what was His command to them? He said, cultivate it and keep it. That means God was giving them work. And what work was that? Cultivate it. They were made farmers. They said, keep it, maintain it. They were made managers. So, work is not at all part of the punishment that God gave to man when they sinned. So work is not a curse. Also, we have this common viewpoint that work is divided between sacred and secular. Sacred meaning spiritual, holy, things that are done heavenward, things that are done for God. Secular is everything else. I'm not going to say it's unholy, but I'm going to say that it is everything else that is not and does not have anything to do with God. We put God in the corner of our universe and tell Him, oh Lord, you stay there while I go about my own business. I'll go to work. Don't mind me here. You can very well sit there on your throne for now while I go around doing my work, doing my everyday things. If we put God away from everything else that we're involved in, then that becomes a very dangerous thing for us. Because then we will look for our significance, our importance, and our reward from work. So what happens if you lose your work? Then your significance is gone, you're no longer important, and your reward is no longer there. That is why when during recession and during failure in the economy, there are a lot of people who commit suicide simply because they have put their trust and their whole essence of being into their work. So that is the danger of defining or differentiating our sacred and secular work. There is also that danger that when we say that there is sacred work, real work is now defined to be something that only people in full-time Christian ministry are doing. All other work doesn't matter, which is also a wrong view. Then there is a tendency for us to have pride or to feel guilty. That if you're not doing the work of God full-time, that means you're not doing work at all. So there is that tendency for you to feel guilty. So what do? Every Bible study, every prayer meeting, every activity, even if you're dead tired, you tend to go and participate there because of that guilt in your mind that I'm not doing real work or I'm not doing work enough for God. So we try to compensate and try to do more. Or, for those who are in full-time ministry, they have a tendency to have pride. Okay, I'm doing work because what I'm doing matters to God. Still again, that is a wrong viewpoint altogether. Because mga kapatid, all of life relates to God and is sacred. All. Your 24 hours a day, your 7 days a week, your 365 days a year are all related to God. He wants to be part and parcel of our lives. And He is part and parcel of our lives. So we can never really segregate secular from sacred work. There is no such thing. Because you can be in the holiest of activities, doing prayer meeting, praying there, in solemnity, pouring out your tears, crying your heart out. But then what's in your heart? There's unforgiveness, there's anger, there's grudge. It's all about the heart. You can also be in a very muddled, busy, secular work, but you stand upright for what you believe in, and people's lives are touched because of you, then mind you, what you are doing is better than the one doing their holy work. Because it's all about the heart. The Lord looks at our hearts. That's why, di ba, Jesus was so mad at the Pharisees. Why was he so angry? They were all clothed in their Pharisee outfit, Pharisee costume. And here they are. How many times Jesus has rebuked them and told them, "You hypocrites!" Why? Because in their public lives, they are all holy. They have phylacteries on their forehead and on their belts, walking very slowly, very mild-mannered. But they had such anger and such unforgiving spirits within them. That's why Jesus has rebuked them time and again. You are hypocrites. Because when we start separating our sacred work and our secular work, that does not make sense. Because God does not want you to be doing holy things. He wants us to be living holy lives. That is such a powerful statement to me when I discovered this statement. Because we can be doing the holiest of things, as I've mentioned, and yet our lives do not define that holy presence that we are exuding. So, how does God want us to view work? We've seen the view of faulty work, the faulty view of work, rather. So now let's turn to Colossians chapter 3, where the Apostle Paul brings us to that view of how we should address work. So he starts by saying, "Servants, do what you're told by your earthly masters." Remember that during this time, the Apostle Paul was addressing the different relationships that we have. He has defined the relationship between husbands and wives. This is where he says that wives, you should submit to your husbands, etc. And here, he also defined the way parents and children should relate to each other. So in this portion, Paul was defining the relationship and the hierarchy between servants and masters. In today's context, that will be employers and employees, our bosses and us. Right? So what did Paul say? He said, servants, do what you're told by your earthly masters. What Paul is saying here is that we should be obedient to our masters. God has ordained the role of employers for us. And how we relate to them is very important in the way we view our work. So first, he calls to us to be obedient to them. And then he continues to say, and don't just do the minimum, that you will just get by. He said, do your best. What is that minimum? What is in our job description? A lot of times when we're already tired, we say, that's not part of my job description. He did not only tell us to extend and do more than what is expected of us, he also calls us to do our best. When we do our best, that does not mean that you have to be number one. It does not mean that you have to be first honor. What is demanded of us is to do the best that we can be. You don't have to be number one, but you have to be the best in what you're doing. Always aspire to be the best. And when we do that, our attitude towards work is going to be different, right? Because I don't know if this is true, but Albert Einstein is known for this statement. He said, everybody is a genius. But if you judge a fish by its ability to climb up a tree, it will live believing that it is dull. Pinalitan ko po yung last word because I couldn't say it. Search and you'll find out what it is. Because it's true. You can never be judged, or we can never judge someone for their ability to say, run a marathon, if he cannot run a marathon. You can never judge a fish by being a genius if you check its ability in climbing a tree. But that doesn't call us to mediocrity. Paul is still admonishing us, do your best. And if there are things that we don't know, if there are things that we are weak at, there is a mentor that you can go to. There is your boss that you can go to and ask. Sabi nga nila, libreng magtanong. Walang masama sa pagtatanong. And continuing, the Apostle Paul continues to say, work from the heart for your real master, for God, confident that you'll get paid in full when you come into your inheritance. Work from the heart. Work as if God is your master. This is revolutionary. This is a totally different thing to look at our masters just like they are Christ. Pag tinawag ka siguro nila, no, Barry, halika. Yes, Jesus. Parang ganun yung attitude. That's how your attitude should be. Siguro complete with salute, stand at attention, or even a courtesy that we can give them. Because you know that you are serving your very own master who is the Lord. That is how revolutionary Paul was changing the view of employers for the Israelites during that time. And that is his admonition for us even today. He says, work with all your heart, as if working for the Lord. If we do this, we're not going to badmouth our employers anymore. Diba? We're not going to say, ayan na naman si Palaka, kokak na naman ang kokak. Why? Dakdak ng dakdak eh. Diba? He keeps on nagging and nagging and nagging. So we always brand them with names. We curse, we grumble inside every time our employers call us. There's such anger or animosity inside of us. But if we look at them as if we are serving the Lord, then they will be the most beautiful of all employers. Because then, your viewpoint will change, that I am not serving the employer, but instead I am serving God. He further says, keep in mind always that the ultimate master you're serving is Christ. Because it is doing our best, not being the best among others, that matters to God. In everything that we do, we should do our very best. So allow me to bring you to a story in the Bible, wherein we will be able to see these workers, these servants who have given of their best. Let's put it in practical terms. Genesis chapter 24 is a story of how Rebekah was found for Isaac. We're going to look at how the servants have obeyed their masters, showing how they did their best, not being compared to others, not being the best, but doing their best, that it mattered to the Lord. The story brings us at a time when Abraham was very old, and the Lord has blessed him in every way. They say old age is a blessing from the Lord. So old as he was, Sarah at this time was already dead, and Ishmael was also gone. So it was just him and Isaac once again. They say that Isaac was already in his 40s. 40. And Abraham wanted to find him a wife. He already said, Anak, you're already 40. We need divine intervention already for you to find a wife. But Abraham already deemed it fit to help Isaac find a spouse, find a wife. So what did Abraham do? Abraham called his PA, personal assistant. He called his oldest servant, the man who was in charge of his household. And what did he say? PA, come. Take an oath by putting your hand under my thigh. What? That's really written. Look at your Bibles. Take an oath by putting your hand under my thigh. So that means put your hand under your thigh. Can you imagine what's happening? It was not simply pinky swear or promise, cross your heart, hope to die. It had to be a promise that by which he needed to put his hand under the thigh of Abraham. What did that mean? It was a very important task. It was a very important oath that this servant, that his PA needed to do. But once you put your hand under the thigh of someone, that means you are tied to that promise and you had to fulfill it. And what was that oath that Abraham asked the servant to do? He said, find my son Isaac a wife, but not an ordinary wife. She has to be a God-fearing person. So Abraham said, swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and earth, that you will not allow my son to marry one of these locals, Canaanite woman, not local. Go instead to my homeland, to my relatives, and find a wife there for Isaac. Why did Abraham need to make his servant promise not to get a wife for Isaac from the locals? Remember, Abraham has already moved out of his hometown and is now in Hebron, which is a Canaanite land. And during that time, of course, they were surrounded by Canaanites. And if the servant would have been just asked, find a wife for Isaac, what would he have done? He would just have gotten any beautiful woman on the road, take her, and presented her to Isaac. But Abraham had a criteria. His criteria was the wife needed to be God-fearing. And we all know that Canaanites weren't that. They were idol worshippers. They were an immoral people. He was not being racist at this time. It's just simply that Abraham wanted to obey God's covenant with him, which is that he was going to be the father of their nation. So with this oath, nakasalalay ang future ng nation of Israel. With this oath, the future of Israel was there. That's why it was a very solemn oath that needed to be fulfilled. So, the servant needed to go to the homeland of Abraham and there seek for a wife for Isaac. Where Abraham was, in Hebron, up until Nahor, he will need to travel about 450 miles to be able to reach there. And that's not an easy task. Add to that, once he meets the woman, he will have to get that woman and bring him to Isaac. So the command was really somewhat outrageous. But still, the servant, being obedient, promised to Abraham, yes, boss, I will find a wife for Isaac. And the servant prepared well. His PA got 10 camels and put all the treasures that Abraham asked him to carry. The PA starts traveling 435 miles down the road, and he travels for about 17 days with his 10 camels and I'm sure a whole entourage. And what happens next? When he reaches Nahor, he sits by the pool, by the well. Why did he sit there? Because during night, that is when the women comes out. Why? Because they're going to fetch water from the well. So, the PA sits himself there, expectant that the women will be parading before him as they get their water. So imagine ninyo, he was sitting there. So while he was waiting, he prays. And what was his prayer? He said, Lord God, make me successful today. May it be that when I say to a young woman, please give me a glass of water, she would not only give me a glass of water, she would offer something even more, extend an extra mile. And what is that? To give drink to my camels. And if there's someone who will do that, let her be the one that you want for my master, Isaac. During that time, if there's a guest who would ask for a glass of water, you will need to indulge. So that's a given. Mahirap yon. Mahirap yung criteria na yon. If that's the criteria that will be the basis of his choosing. That's why he needed another criteria. And what was that criteria? That when she allows me to give a drink, she will also offer to give drink to my camels. Why is that a weird request? Because he had 10 camels. Traveling 435 miles, each camel will be able to drink 20 to 30 gallons of water. Times 10, that's about 300 gallons. And when I researched it, 300 gallons would be 1,000 kilos of water. Who lifts weights here? I don't know if you can lift. How heavy? How heavy was the weightlifter, the one who won Kerry? I don't think that's even 500 kilos, right? Am I right? Correct me if I'm wrong. It was not only the effort, but also the time. The person who will have to do this will not only need strength and energy, but he will also need to dedicate her time to doing that. But what happens? Even before the servant had finished his prayer, a beautiful woman comes. Your Bible says that. A beautiful woman comes. And what was this beautiful woman doing? She was going to fetch water, and her name is Rebecca. Rebecca was there to fetch water. And as she fetched water, the PA approaches her and tells her, can you give me water to drink? Oh, sure, sir. Rebecca goes, sure, sir. Gives him a drink and then tells him, and after your drink, sir, I will give your camels a drink as well. Da-da-da-dun. Can you imagine that? What sound, what music was going to be in the background when that person offers? Parang biglang slow motion. What do you call that? Fireworks, sparklers all over. She's the one. Rebecca not only offers him a drink, but also offers to give the camels a drink. And as I have explained, that was not going to be an easy task. So after doing that, what do you think happened? 2 checkpoints. A God-fearing woman was seen. Why? Because of her attitude towards work. She did not only do what was expected of her, she even did even more than what was expected of her. And I think the same goes for us. If in our offices, if in our workplace, they would see that there's something different in the way we conduct our work, don't you think it will be easier for you to invite them in your koinonias or invite them in church? Because they know that there's something different about you. There's something interesting about you because you are doing your best, not being the best among others, but doing your best that matters to God. And the servant saw that so magnificently in the life of Rebecca, in how she conducted her work. That is why as he drank, he needed to explain to her what her purpose was, what his purpose was. And he tells her, my master Isaac is looking for a wife, etc., etc. I'm sure she painted a very beautiful picture of Isaac. He's God-fearing. He's so handsome. He's so matipuno. Diba? Masipag. Guapo. I'm sure he rattled off a lot of beautiful adjectives as far as Isaac was concerned, to be able to tell Rebekah, come with me and be the wife to my master. And during that time, what happened next? The servant gave Rebekah the treasures, a nose ring and bracelets, which Rebekah accepted. That means once you accept it, you're already in a relationship. So they were now in a relationship. If she did not accept the nose ring, it's complicated. But since she accepted all of them, so it's now in a relationship. So Rebekah went with the PA, brought her to the family, and told the family of the story of how he was in search for a beautiful wife for his master. And then the rest is history. Because of Rebekah's attitude towards work, she has placed a very important role in the story of in our salvation, in our redemption story, because she then got married to Isaac. And Isaac loved her and took care of her, and thus the lineage of David and the lineage of Jesus Christ came from. It is doing our best, not being the best that we can be, that matters to God. There would have been someone who was able to fetch water faster. Rebekah did her best in extending even more than what was expected of her. Even Jesus Christ in the Sermon of the Mount gave that, right? Ano yung sabi ni Christ? He said, if someone slaps you in the face, what did he say? Give the other cheek. If he asks for your overcoat, give him your sweater. And if he asks you to walk 1 mile, walk another mile. Because that's how different we should be in terms of the way we look at work. It is doing our best, not being the best among others, that matters to God. Eric Liddell was a Scottish athlete. He was a runner. Chariots of the Fire, if you remember that movie years ago, had this to say as he was running the marathon. He said, I believe that God made me for a purpose, but He also made me fast. And when I run, I feel His pleasure. Are we giving God the pleasure of our service? It is not about where you are, but it is about where your hearts are that matters. Give your best, always, in everything you do. Whether that's doing a business presentation, or cleaning the toilet, or the bathtubs, folding our clothes, preparing your baby's meal, or sharing the gospel to someone. Give your best, because that's what we're called to do. It is doing our best, not being the best among others, that matters to God.